Well, my treasures, it's time to go over the final cards for the Titans set, and today we'll be covering the Mage, Warlock, and a Warrior cards. So let's begin with the first Mage card, their Keeper, Sif. Sif is a 6 cost 4 attack, 6 HP minion with spell power +1, improved by each spell school you've cast this game. Hey, it's a cheaper Malagos if you are able to get additional spell schools that Mage doesn't normally have access to. In fact, this can be up to 7 spell damage on a single minion, and if you use this in combination with Reverberations, you can get additional copy of this, thus allowing you to get 14 for the mana of 9 mana. Sure, that only leaves you really with 1 mana to finish off your opponent, but being able to scale any spell's damage up by 14 should allow you to OTK your opponent quite easily, especially given there is a lot of mana cheat that you can have access to. Generally, I don't see a world where this doesn't see play. Alright, let's go on to the next discovery tool, Discovery of Magic, a 1-cost spell that discovers a spell from a school that you haven't cast this game from any class. This is the main card that you're going to be using in combination with the previous card in order to get access to as many spell schools as you want to scale her up. This also does allow you to get access to some really cheap direct damaging spells such as Lightning Bolt, Mage, when you normally wouldn't have access to it. There's just a lot of possibilities with this card. You can use it in combination with Rewind in order to get more copies, thus allowing you to get even more schools of magic for Sif. Generally, this is just going to be an incredibly good turn 1 play for a lot of Mage decks, and it doesn't take too much of building around. I could see this scene play in every single Mage deck in the game. Now, for the next card, which is a Molten Rune, a 3-cost Forge spell with a Fire School. Deal 3 damage, get a random spell. Forge, this casts twice, so you get 2 random spells instead of 1 for 3 mana, and essentially allows you to do 6 damage. It's better than Fireball because it gives you 2 additional resources to use on the following turn. Now for the next card, which is Wisdom of Norragon, a 5-cost arcane spell that draws 2 cards, costs 1 less for each different school of magic you've cast this game. This is draw power for the multiple schools of magic deck. Probably will see a lot of play just because we do have a lot of ways to get spells outside of our own class in Mage right now, and this is just a really good draw card for that deck. Now let's get on to the big payoff for the deck, a Revisit of Grand Finale, Elemental Inspiration, a 7-cost spell that summons a 4/5 Vortex with a random bonus effect for each spell school you've cast this game. And while it isn't very clear here on the card, each Vortex will be very similar to one Amalgam Ban, where they'll get a bonus effect per spell school that you use instead of just getting 1 per minion. Now, this does not have any type of spell school on it, which is the one downside of the card, but given some of the later cards that we'll be going over, this is actually probably a decent enough card to see a lot of play, as if you can at least get 3 or 4, there is a high likelihood of you getting Wind Fury on multiple minions, which is just going to be outright insane. And speaking of more elemental support, the first one is going to be Unchained Gladiator, a 4-cost 4 attack 4 HP elemental. Battlecry, draw a card, repeat for each elemental you played last turn. Again, in the same vein as some of the previous elemental support that we've seen in older sets. The only problem I see with a card like this is the fact that it does rely on you running a bunch of cheap elementals. And honestly, outside of Synchronize, you don't have access to getting additional copies of 1-cost elementals in Mage. It also kind of does explain why Flame Geyser was put in the core set in this new rotation. Generally though, as long as you can draw 1 or 2 cards, this is a really good card for that deck, and we'll probably end up seeing some play somewhere. Now for the next card, which is going to be Aqua Archivist, a 2-cost 2 attack 2 HP elemental. Outright, the next elemental you play costs 2 less. You can just bank this on something into the late game, such as Ragnaros, if you have a way to copy it. If you want to run Ragnaros, though, I do think the better big payoff if you're going to run a very expensive elemental is going to be Neptulon, just because it is a Wind Fury elemental. Overall, this is a really good minion. There's no world this doesn't see play as long as we keep continuing to see elemental support within Mage. Now let's get on to the next card, which is Chill-O-Matic, a 2-cost 2 attack 3 HP mech. Magnetize, freeze any character damaged by this minion. At first glance, this isn't actually that good of a card. However, when you think about Mecha Shark, this means that every single little point of damage out of that minion is going to freeze your opponent's board, which means this is going to be super frustrating to play against. I can't see a world where this doesn't see play. Alright, those were all the mage cards. Let's get on to the warlock cards. The first one is going to be a Loken, Jailer of Yogg Saron, a 6 cost 3 attack 3 HP minion. Outright discover a minion from your deck. Summon a tentacle with its stats and taunt. The first thing that I can think of is Phantom. You can get a 15/15 for 6 mana, which is actually quite bonkers. I'm curious if a deck very similar to some of the older style of Barnes deck, where you only run 1 or 2 minions within the entire deck, will come around this card and Phantom. The benefit of this card over Barnes, though, in particular, is the fact that you can run 2 additional minions within the deck. As long as you have a low minion count where you can always consistently get to the 15/15, this should be still playable. And honestly, compared to some of the later cards in Warlock that we'll be going over, is probably one of the better ones out of the bunch. And the next card, the Forge of Wills, is a 3-cost location with 2 durability. Choose a friendly minion, summon a giant with its stats, and rush. This, in combination with the previous card, will allow you to get 30/30 worth of stats for 6 mana, which is batshit crazy. There's if Loken sees a lot of play, then a card like this will probably end up seeing a lot of play too, just because of how consistently you should be able to get huge statted minions that not all classes will be able to deal with. Now let's get on to the next card. Chaotic Consumption, a 1-cost spell that destroys a friendly minion to destroy an enemy minion. So you get to choose what minions that you're going to destroy. This will allow you to trigger whatever death rattle you really want to, which is cool. And it allows you to get rid of whatever minion your opponent has that you really want to get rid of, which is also cool for 1 mana, making Phantom a little bit weaker in a mirror match. However, if you have a way to use this card consistently in something like Imp Warlock, this could introduce more of a control aspect to that deck, since you are running a lot of ways to generate additional imps, and then you have ways to get a lot of advantage using them to remove a huge taunt or something else. There's a lot of possibilities for this card. While it is a little bit boring, it probably will see some play somewhere. Alright, let's get on to the next card. Disciple of Sargeras, a 4-cost Forge minion with 3 attack, 3 HP. Battlecry, discard a spell to summon 2/3/2 imps. Forge, give them +2 health and taunt. Why are we seeing discard Warlock support? You'll see in some of the later cards that we will not be seeing any cards that want to be discarded. However, we do have things like Soul Barrage in rotation still. That do technically want to be discarded. However, I don't think you wanting to discard Soul Barrage is going to make you want to run this card in particular. It is one of the weakest cards that we've seen in a long time. Maybe the mini set will introduce something that does want to be discarded, but until then, I don't think this one is going to see much play, especially because you also have this next card, Wing Welding, a 4-cost spell that discards the highest cost card, deals damage equal to its cost to all minions. Like I said, if you're going to run some type of discard Warlock in standard Hearthstone, this card is just a lot better than the previous one. You can use this to always basically guarantee you get rid of Soul Barrage, since it does have a high cost on it. Honestly, this is the type of discard Warlock support that we kind of do need if we're going to want to make the deck work, where it either discards the highest cost card in your hand or the lowest cost card. However, the main problem between these two cards, again, is the fact that we don't really have any good discard targets. Now, for the next card, which is going to be Imprisoned Horror, a 9-cost 5-attack 5 HP minion that costs 1 less for each damage you've taken on your turns. This game, holy shit, this is probably the best card out of the set for Warlock. I know I really like the idea between Loken and Forge of Wills in order to make a big meme. However, this card is just going to be consistently good. In Standard, you also have things like Blood Treant in order to take 5 damage on turn 1, where in theory you could slam down 2 of these plus the 2 Blood Treants on turn 1, aka equivalent of having 14/14 worth of stats that no one's going to be able to deal with, which means you're probably just going to end up losing the game. if any card out of Warlocks has the chance to actually see some type of nerf, this is going to be the card. It's a card to watch out for, even if it isn't broken right away. Alright, let's get on to the next card, Monstrous Form, which is a 1-cost shadow spell that gives a friendly minion +3/+3 until your next turn. A little bit weaker of a power overwhelming, however, it doesn't kill your minion, which makes it a little bit stronger. It's essentially just a way to do 3 damage to your opponent's face, or trade in one of your cheaper minions into your opponent's minion. That is big. Generally, this card is incredibly boring in my opinion, however, it will probably see some type of play just because it has a lot of flexibility. Alright, let's get on to the next card, Mortal Eradication, a 3-cost shadow spell that deals 5 damage randomly split among all enemy minions. Restore 2 health to your hero for each killed. On turn 3, if your opponent only has 1 or 2 minions, this should in theory allow you to heal up to 4, which isn't necessarily bad while getting rid of your opponent's minions. Though the problem with this card is it's competing with other things like Dragged Below, where you can consistently get rid of whatever key minion your opponent wants to slam down, or even competing with Drained Soul that costs 1 less. Generally, if this maybe did 1 or 2 more damage, this might see some play, but as it currently stands, I think it is just a tiny bit too weak to see too much play. Now for the next card, which is going to be Thorn Veil Tentacle, a 2-cost 2 attack 2 HP minion with lifesteal. Battlecry, deal 2 damage to a random enemy minion. There is no world where this sees play. It doesn't have any type of tribal tag on it, which means there's no synergy that you could do there. It does 2 damage on turn 2 when you could just use Drain Soul instead. Sure, it gives you a 2/2 body, but it's not a big enough body in modern Hearthstone to be that playable. Honestly, I am actually kind of shocked of how much Void synergy that we have with Warlock as a class in the set in particular. I know they do have Loken, who is the Trader Keeper. However, Loken and Sargeras' motivations are kind of opposites of each other. Sargeras wants to destroy the Void, while Loken wants to free Yogg, who is technically part of the Void. So it's weird that they decided to choose those two to go together. But I guess they wanted to pair the Trader Titan with the Trader Keeper. Just generally, Warlock really feels weak in the set. Alright, now let's start with the Warrior cards. I love to hate this dude. Burnt by the flames of Ragnaros himself to gain him a fiery beard. Odyn, the Prime Designate, a 8-cost, 8 attack, 8 HP minion with the Battlecry for the rest of the game. After your hero gains armor, they gain that much attack for this turn. Holy shit, Control Warrior finally has a big payoff. So, this card reminds me a lot of a Nubercon, where you could mana cheat out a bunch of minions for a bunch of armor. However, the difference with this card is the fact that you're gaining a bunch of attack, which is probably going to end up being a lot more problematic. Sure, the first turn you slam this guy down, you're not going to be able to gain much armor because you only will have 2 mana to spend. But on the following turn, if you combo a Lava Gorger into a Naga Giant, you gain 20 armor and 20 attack, which is absolutely insane for only 4 mana. It also does make it extremely clear why Armorsmith had to go in the recent rotation, because if those cards both existed at the same time in standard rotation, then we would have a huge problem on our hands. Given the fact that Warrior is one of the weakest classes as it currently is, this card should allow it to push towards the top of playability, at least in standard Hearthstone. I still can't see a world where this doesn't see play. Now let's get to the next card, which is going to be Stone Skin Armorer, a 3-cost, 3 attack, 4 HP minion. Battlecry, if your armor changed this turn, draw 2 cards. So on turn 5, this is a guaranteed draw 2, which is really nice. However, this card actually might push some people to run Tour Guide in Warrior, where you're going to slam down Tour Guide on turn 2, thus allowing you to get instant access to changing your armor on the following up turn. There's just a lot of possibilities that you could use this in combination with, and I can't see a world where it doesn't see play, because it's a draw power card with not that big of a condition, and man oh man, has Warrior been missing that type of card. Now let's get on to the next card, which is Craftsman Hammer, a 4-cost, 3 attack, 3 durability weapon. After your hero attacks, kills a minion, gain 4 armor. Now, with Odyn, this card actually doesn't work, which is a little bit depressing. If they changed the order of how you gain the armor, then it would work perfectly with Odyn, but that might have been a little bit too strong. Because of this, I don't really see a world where this sees too much play. Now for the next card, which is going to be Minotaurin, a 6-cost, 5 attack, 5 HP minion. Rush, whenever this minion deals damage, gain that much armor. Perfect enabler for Odyn. If you can combo this with something like Black Rock and Roll, where it becomes a 10-10, this will allow you to gain 10 attack on whatever turn that you do slam this down, and it doesn't require too much setup. You can also make it into a 20-20 if you use Lothomar, which is something that a lot of warrior decks already do if they're running Black Rock and Roll. This is just a really powerful card that can act as a nice removal tool for whatever big taunt minion your opponent might have, while also giving you a lot of advantage on how much attack that your hero can gain. It's also interesting to see how Warrior seems to be pushing in a direction that no longer focuses on Menagerie, which is kind of cool. Now for the next card, which is Smelt, a 2-cost fire spell that gives a random minion in your hand +3/+3, lose 3 armor, do it again. So essentially, if you have 3 armor, this is going to be +6/+6. If you hit something with charge in your hand, that's incredibly good since Warrior is the only class with charge minions currently in standard, outside I think of maybe Druid. But unlike Druid, Warrior does still run some of those cards, so you could in theory hit that. You could also hit something like Remoria in order to increase the attack on her. That's allowing you to hit your opponent's face for quite a bit. Just generally a really good buff card, and probably will see a lot of play since fire-based warrior decks were already a thing. Now for the next card, which is going to be Steam Guardian, a 3-cost, 3 attack, 3 HP elemental. Battlecry, draw a spell, reduce the cost of a fire spell in your hand by 1. So this is a tutor for Black Rock and Roll, since there are so many ways to get additional spells now in standard rotation in the neutral pool. You could, in theory, just always run only Black Rock and Roll, and thus allow you to instantly draw into it for perfect curve on turn 4. Because of which, I can't see where this doesn't see play, since Black Rock and Roll was the one thing holding Warrior up as it currently is, and being able to get more consistent access to it should be something that Warrior does want to. Next card is Bellowing Flames, a 3-cost forged spell with fire as its school. Deal 5 damage to a minion forged, then deal 5 damage split among all enemy minions, and then the forge one looks like this. This is a better version of the 3-cost spell from Warlock that we went over earlier in this video, because it allows you to have both targeted removal and some type of AoE removal if you decide to forge it. However, the one downside about this is if you do decide to forge it, it's going to basically cost 5 instead of 3, which makes it a little bit weaker. And when it compares to some of the other fire spells that you might want to run in Warrior, I think this is probably one of the weakest ones, which makes me think it probably won't see too much play in the end. Now for the next card, which is Trial by Flame, a 7-cost fire spell. Summon 5/1/1 Valkyrie with Rush. Whenever one dies, give the others +1/+1. I was wondering if they were going to mention the Valkyries in any of the warrior cards, since Odyn was going to be their keeper, and because he was the one that forced Helia to become the first one. Odyn in WoW is quite a asshole, but generally with this card, I know you're probably not going to want to run it in a control warrior deck. However, you might want to run this in some type of token generating deck where you're wanting to generate a bunch of tokens, feed into infuses and such. This also does give you a pretty good board state whenever you do rush your minions into some of your opponent's minions, thus acting as a pretty good removal tool. And because it does have the fire tag, it does have some synergy with things like Thor Balor, which you could instantly revive using this and then also buff everything else up. Honestly, it's probably an alright card. I don't think it's incredibly strong, so who knows? Maybe someone will find some type of meme deck, but because it costs 7, it's probably something that won't see too much play. Now for the final card of the set, Furious Forge, a 2-cost 1 attack, 3 HP magnetic, also damages minions next to whoever this attacks. Now, for 2 mana, I don't know if this ability is actually worth it, and because I guess you could, in theory, use it in a Menagerie deck. That would be the only possible home that I could see this in, because that deck does tend to run a lot of amalgams, which do count as mechs. Just generally speaking, this ability has never really been too strong outside of the cases of Hollowed Hound, and that's only because you have lifesteal on it. Generally, unless you're going to be comboing this out with Ziliax consistently, I think this card is still too weak. Now, those were all the cards revealed for Titan, so let me know down below what you're most excited for. I can't believe we finally got a really good warrior card in the form of Odyn. It's been so long since that class has had a big payoff, and I am a little bit frightened by what that card possibly could mean for the class, because I think that is an easy card to hit early on. And like always, if you enjoyed the video, please like, comment, subscribe. Until next time, bye-bye.